I think the Palestinians are experiencing something a lot like what the American Indians experience, and you have to decide, of course, what you think of that. You know, do you think that that's good? Do you think that that's something that should be going on? I personally find I don't agree with it. I don't think it's right. This week's been a great week. Had some good time with my son, playing some games. Take a look. The weather's getting so good nowadays. We're getting up into the high 60s, even hitting 70 degrees, which I know for a lot of people it's not that warm, but that's warm for us here in Western New York, about 20 degrees Celsius. Got to head out on the bike all the way up to Goat Island, which is out in Niagara Falls, between the American Falls and the Canadian Falls. This great spring weather we're having reminds me so much of Lebanon. This kind of weather is just like what they have there. They enjoy it a lot more than us, though. They have many months of nice weather in the fall as it slowly cools down, in the spring as it slowly warms up. Just a beautiful place to live. And the people are great. I made so many good friends I still know today. And, you know, Jesus Christ, when he came, he took on flesh, as it says in the Bible, and he became a man and fully understands everything that we as humans go through, because he was one himself. He's not just talking at us. He's lived through what we have in our lives as well. He doesn't have this difficulty relating to us because he came and lived just like we live, through the temptations that we have, through the difficulties, the suffering that we all go through. And part of being in Lebanon was to learn and be a person like a Lebanese and start to understand what's going on. Well, the Lebanese helped me to learn about so many things, but one thing I learned that is very relevant now is about Israel and Palestine, because right now there's a conflict there, and really there's been a conflict going on for a long time, but now it's becoming a lot more violent. And the Israel-Palestinian conflict is something that I learned about from Lebanese. I was at Palestinian camps. I taught English to some kids at the Lebanese the camps there. They got refugee camps that have been there for decades, and there was so much I learned. And so when I was able to understand what's been going on there, being in the region, it really changed what I have been thinking since I'm coming from North America, where we're very far from all that. You know, the news you read or you listen to, it doesn't always provide you with a lot of context to understand really what's going on. You just hear the story and it's interpreted by the person that's telling you. But there's a lot to be said for the context, like what is going around the actual story that you're hearing in the news. And when the Lebanese told me about what's going on with Palestinians, when I talked to Palestinians about what's going on with Palestinians, I really started to think about the American Indian experience. And so I want to share with you a little bit about how I think that the Palestinians are living a situation that's very similar to the American Indians. And I wanted to bring up Geronimo. You might remember Geronimo. He's an Apache Indian from the Southwest United States. His name Geronimo is so famous because of how he was unable to be killed, is actually where he got his reputation. He kept evading the U.S. Army, even though the U.S. Army wanted to kill him and punish him. They had a hard time doing it. He was a person that, like a cat, you know, he had 9 lives in a way. So the story of Geronimo is he was an Apache Indian in the southwest United States. Arizona is the current state that he had lived in his tribe. Now, the Mexican government was originally over that territory in charge, and they weren't very tightly controlling the area, so the tribe was still living sort of autonomously, you could say. And then the U.S. Army beat the Mexican Army in the Mexican American War, and so Mexico had to cede the Southwest to the United States, and the United States just took all this land, a huge amount of land in the Southwest, California, and this area here. So Geronimo went from being under the Mexicans to now under the U.S., and the U.S. wanted tighter control of their land, so they went to Geronimo's area and they put up a reservation. So all the Apaches in the Geronimo's area had to live in the reservation. It's essentially putting a wall or a cage, a fence around the people that live there. All right, so Geronimo's tribe had to live in that area, but they initially were able to handle it until the U.S. Army said, now you have to move to a different reservation that's not your land. They were forced to go to a different reservation that was a distance away from their homeland, and that upset them a lot. So Geronimo kept leaving the reservation, escaping illegally with others of his Apache tribe. Well, the Army was upset about that, and they would continue to bring them back. And over years, it was wearing down the patience of the Army. The Army was upset that they kept leaving and wanted to kill Geronimo. Well, Geronimo knew that they wanted to kill him, and he decided to surrender at his last escape. And the U.S. Army took him and other Apaches that had escaped with him to a reservation near Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and that's where he lived the last 14 years of his life until he died. So Geronimo is a case of a person who was on his land and then was told he could no longer live in his land, and then he fought against the people that took his land and took his freedom until he was imprisoned by them and ended up dying as a prisoner. Geronimo nowadays would be considered a terrorist, actually, because Geronimo would leave his reservation and raid the surrounding areas for food and supplies. I mean, they didn't have anything, so when they escaped, they would need to get food and a place to live and all that. So anyway, they were causing problems and terrorizing people. You could say a terrorist. So that's the kind of person that Geronimo was, and what happened to him and the Apaches. Now, the Palestinians, I think, are experiencing something just like that. So the Palestinians lived in the land that they used to live in, which is now Israel, and they had been told to leave that land as the people of the country of Israel today came and migrated and then settled that area. So the people that were originally from the area had to move out. Some of them moved to the West Bank and Gaza. They were able to sort of go east and go south, but millions of Palestinians had to leave the area entirely. They're in refugee camps in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, all over the world. Actually, there's Palestinians. So what you have is a people that were moved from their land, like the Apaches were, by other people, and then they have to find out another place to live. Can't go back to where they're originally from. And so the Palestinians have been in this kind of situation for, about more than 70 years now. The thing that's also similar, I think, about the Palestinians and the Apaches is that the Palestinians really can't compete with Israel militarily. It's not really like a fair fight, as you would say. Like when you think of a war, you think of there's maybe a possibility of either side winning. This really isn't a war like that. It's more like where the U.S. Army took the land of the Apaches. It's not really similar in the power of the U.S. against the Apaches. The Apaches didn't have anything similar to how the U.S. Army had with weapons and resources and organization and all that. And Israel, it's a nuclear power next to people in the Palestinians that really don't have much besides they can get a few AKs and a few rockets, as they trying to get illegal weapons because none of the weapons, of course, are legal for them. So yeah, it's not really similar in any way. The economy of Israel is in the billions. Palestinians are, West Bank is producing very low amounts of GDP per year. It's just not similar in any way. So I think all that to say that I think the Palestinians are experiencing something a lot like what the American Indians experience, and you have to decide, of course, what you think of that. Do you think that that's good? Do you think that that's something that should be going on? I personally find I don't agree with it. I don't think it's right. I think that the people that have a place to live shouldn't be pushed out of the place to live. I wouldn't want to be pushed out of the place I live. But a lot of people think the U.S. is this great country, and the U.S. had pushed out the people that previously lived in the land, nearly the entire country. So everybody's got to decide what they think politically and all that. But I think that from my experience, I just wanted to share what I've learned and what I think changed about me from being in the region, really living there. I know there's not that many people that have lived in that area that live now in the United States. And so I want to share that with you. And I hope that that's informative for you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.